Arthur, this place is lit up. There are multiple non-standard transmission sources, and they're all coming from that unit. Where? Arthur, this isn't just broadcasting equipment. This is military-grade psychological operations hardware.
They say that nights in London are full of secrets. But if the Camden footage hadn't been changed, tomorrow's Trooping the Colour would have turned into complete chaos. And believe me, you won't want to miss this one. It's about a young guardsman, his amazing horse, and a plot that almost ruined one of Britain's most important ceremonies. Picture this, it's 11:30 on a Tuesday night in the Camden Market area. The rain is falling in that typical London drizzle that soaks you to the bone without you even knowing it. The neon signs from the late-night kebab shops and old record stores are bouncing off the wet pavement, making these kaleidoscope patterns that move with every bus that goes by. Arthur Finch was on his way home from his second job. Yes, even the Queen's Guard needs to make extra money in this economy. You can hear music thumping from a bar 3 blocks away, along with the sound of tires on wet asphalt. 24 years old, been in the household cavalry for 3 years, and still having trouble paying rent in Zone 3. Arthur's mom's medical bills weren't getting any smaller, and the landlord's patience wasn't getting any longer. But that night, Arthur wasn't alone. He had his 4-year-old bay gelding, Valor, with him. I know what you're thinking, why is a guard walking his horse through Camden at midnight? Valor had been acting weird all week, though. He was restless in the stables, banging on the door of his stall and not settling down. Arthur knew better than to believe the duty veterinarian when he said it was just pre-ceremony nerves. He could read Valor like a book, and this horse was trying to tell him something. As they got closer to the intersection of Camden High Street and Chalk Farm Road, the air changed. The usual sounds of London nightlife, far-off sirens, late buses, and the odd drunk arguing with their Uber driver, seemed to fade into the background. That's when the first weird thing happened. A brand new white van, the kind that screams not suspicious at all, pulled up to the corner. It looked like electrical tape was covering part of the license plate. They called it situational awareness, and Arthur's training kicked in right away. Put the details away, trust your gut, and don't make yourself a target. But Valor? Valor had other ideas. The horse suddenly moved to the side, taking a half step that put its huge body directly between Arthur and the van. His ears perked up and his nostrils flared as he smelled the air. Then came the sound that would stay with Arthur for weeks, 3 sharp stamps of Valor's right hoof on the wet pavement. Stamp. 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 Then silence. Now things get interesting. One of those dome-shaped CCTV cameras that are all over London started flashing red above them. It was just a quick flash, like it was trying to focus on something. Then, nothing. Total blackout. The thing just. Arthur felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up when he heard that. In the household cavalry, they teach you that things that happen by chance are usually not what they seem. A strange van, a scared horse, and no cameras. That's not bad luck, that's planning. The cargo area of the van had a faint chemical, industrial smell. It could be paint thinner or another solvent. It smells like something has been wiped clean and evidence has been erased. Valor's nostrils flared wider, and Arthur could feel the tension rippling through 16 hands of pure muscle beneath that regulation tack. Arthur wanted to pull out his phone and record everything right then and there. Write down the license plate number and the make and model of the van, and maybe even take a picture of the people inside. But there are strict rules for how the military talk to each other, especially for units as well known as the household cavalry. No social media, no recordings without permission, and no talking to the press without permission. The rules keep ceremonies running smoothly and guardsmen busy. So Arthur did what he was trained to do. He learned by heart. Every little thing was burned into his memory like pictures. The back bumper of the van was dented. The way the driver's shadow bent over what looked like electronic gear. He counted 9 minutes until the light came back on, which was the exact time the CCTV stopped working. The van left as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind only the smell of chemicals and Valor's continued anger. 3 more stamps, and the horse finally calmed down, though his ears stayed alert, picking up sounds that Arthur couldn't hear. They got home without any more problems, but Arthur spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling of his small studio apartment, going over every detail. What did Valor want him to know? Why was the horse so protective? What were the chances that a CCTV camera would stop working right when a suspicious van showed up? He had his answer by morning. But not the way he thought. At 6 a.m., Arthur's phone started buzzing with message after message from his squad mates. Links to TikTok videos, Twitter posts, and Instagram stories, all with the same blurry video. A young guardsman in dress uniform was apparently stumbling drunk through Camden Market while his horse reared up and shied away from him in obvious distress. The headlines were already writing themselves: Queen's Guard caught drunk on duty. Spooked horse, sloshed soldier, and is this how we protect the crown? But Arthur knew better. He hadn't had a drink the night before, he was completely sober. And Valor wasn't scared or worried. The horse had been watchful and protective, trying to say something important. Someone had taken that 9-minute CCTV blackout and filled it with lies. By 8 a.m., Arthur was sitting across from his commanding officer, signing more non-disclosure agreements, and being put on temporary leave until a full investigation could be done. They took his phone away. People were keeping an eye on his social media accounts. And the Trooping the Color ceremony tomorrow, which he had been training for all year, would go on without him. But they didn't know this. This is what the people who changed that video and set up that van couldn't have planned for. Valor's 3-stamp warning system wasn't random. It wasn't nerves or fear or whatever the official veterinary report would say later. It was intelligence. Instinctual, pure, 4-legged intelligence that had just found the first hint of something much bigger than a smear campaign. Was it because of those 9 minutes of darkness? They weren't just making fake videos. They were about trying something out. Investigating the security network that keeps one of the most watched events in the world safe. And tomorrow, when thousands of people lined the mall to watch the Queen's birthday parade, that test was going to become something far more dangerous. Arthur didn't know it yet, but Valor had just saved more than his reputation. The horse had seen the first move in a game that could have ruined the whole ceremony. And you'll want to stay tuned to see how this turns out, because that CCTV footage I told you about. The recording that shows what really happened that night. At the end of this story, there's an audio timeline that will blow your mind. But first, we need to talk about what happened when the fake footage went viral and how a data warfare expert named Lark Rowan was about to make Arthur's life a living hell. Trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. Want to know what modern character assassination looks like? Let me give you an idea. By 6 in the morning, Arthur Finch's life was all over every social media site, and the vultures were already circling. This is a perfect storm of digital destruction that would make George Orwell turn over in his grave. The TikTok video had already been seen 2 million times. Same video, different angles, but here's the kicker, every comment section looked like it had been copied and pasted from the same bot farm. Tax money wasted on drunk guards. This is what royal protection looks like. Fire him immediately. The same outrage was posted by accounts with generic names like British Patriot 1847 and Taxpayer Concern. Now, behind all this fake anger was Lark Rowan. Imagine this: you're 38 years old, sharp as a razor, and have a corner office with a view of London Bridge that screams success. It said strategic communications consultant on her business card, but what she really did was use information as a weapon. You know those PR disasters that seem to come out of nowhere? The kind that end careers in a single night. 9 times out of 10, Lark's fingerprints were all over them. Her plan was brilliant in its simplicity. She started a small business called Transparency Initiative, which sounds good, right? It was like she was fighting for what was right and true. But if you looked closer, you'd see that clients were paying a lot of money for what they called narrative adjustment. They were silencing corporate whistleblowers, discrediting political opponents, and bringing down public figures. All of this was done in the name of accountability and reform. Lark found the Camden footage opportunity within hours. A young guard, a big event, and the perfect time. She saw money and power. Her specialty was taking real-life events and turning them into things that would keep people from paying attention. The Trooping the Color was the perfect high-profile target for her to show off her skills to potential clients. Here's how her machine worked: it spread the first deepfake video through a network of bot accounts. Then her team fills the comment sections with the same talking points, which they pretend are real outrage. Real news organizations start covering the story within hours because the engagement numbers look real. By the time anyone thinks to check the source material, the story has already become well known. But Arthur didn't know any of this yet. All he knew was that his commanding officer took his phone away at 7 a.m. sharp, and then he had a meeting that would stay with him for weeks. Colonel Pemberton's office felt smaller than usual that morning. Arthur sat up straight in his dress uniform, and looked at a stack of extra non-disclosure agreements that were so thick they could stop a bullet. The room smelled like leather and disappointment, and portraits of famous cavalry officers looked down, like disappointed ancestors. "Finch," the colonel said, his voice carrying that military tone that meant your career was on the line. "This footage has hurt not only your position but also the reputation of the whole unit 3 days before our most important ceremony of the year." Arthur wanted to talk about Valor's protective behavior, the strange van, and the exact timing of the CCTV blackout. But military rules are always followed. You don't interrupt a superior officer, especially when that officer is deciding whether you still have a future in the Queen's service. The Media Affairs Office has issued a statement. You're on temporary leave pending full investigation. No contact with the press, no social media, and no statements to anyone. Radio silence, understood? Yes, sir. What Arthur couldn't see was the parallel conversation happening in the Royal Armoured Signal Protection Unit. RISB had found something that would change everything, but it would take time to put all the pieces together. Lieutenant Morrison was looking at network logs that didn't make any sense. The Camden CCTV blackout wasn't just a random failure of the equipment. Someone had used a high-tech signal disruptor, which is military-grade hardware that costs more than most people's yearly salary. The 9-minute window was too exact and too easy. This was planned, not by chance. At the same time, Arthur was walking back to his small studio apartment in Zone 3, feeling like a ghost in his own life. People were watching videos on their phones at every bus stop. The same news footage played over and over again in every coffee shop. The hashtag drunk guard was trending all over the world by noon. His personal life was falling apart just as quickly as his work life. At 1:47 p.m., his landlord texted him, "Saw the news. Need to talk about the rent situation. Call me." 3 tabloid reporters had already called his mother's nursing home looking for quotes about her son's drinking problem. Arthur had never felt more alone. But Valor? Arthur had never seen Valor act this way before. During the afternoon training session, when only a few guardsmen were still willing to be seen with Arthur, Valor's ears kept turning toward the sound system in the practice arena. The horse would stamp twice, stop, and then stamp again every time the announcer tested the microphone or someone changed the volume. 2, pause, 1. The same pattern as in Camden, but this time it was more deliberate, and insistent. Arthur tried to brush it off as a stress response. Horses can sense when people are anxious, and Lord knows he had a lot of that going on. But when Valor started acting the same way during equipment checks, specifically when the sound technicians calibrated their high-frequency test tones, Arthur started to pay attention. The horse wasn't just stressed. He was saying something specific about sound, frequencies, and things that people couldn't hear but that clearly bothered a creature with hearing so sensitive that it could hear a predator's footstep from 100 yards away. This is where the story gets interesting. While Arthur was being torn apart in the public eye and Lark Rowan was celebrating another successful character assassination, Valor was gathering information. The horse was working on a pattern recognition system that would save the most popular British ceremony. But no one knew that yet. People could only see a disgraced guard and his supposedly scared horse, both of whom seemed unfit for royal duty. The night brought more trouble. Someone had given out Arthur's private information, like where he lived, where his mother lived, and even his second job delivering groceries to make ends meet. The headlines wrote themselves: Queen's Guard works for DoorDash and Royal Protection or pizza delivery. The memes were already spreading faster than Arthur could count. By midnight, Arthur was lying on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling of his studio apartment, and listening to the sounds of London at night that usually made him feel better. But tonight, even the sound of buses and sirens in the distance felt like they were coming for me. Tomorrow, thousands of people would line the mall for Trooping the Colour, and he wouldn't be among the guards protecting them. Arthur didn't know that Valor's 2-pause-1 rhythm was about to become the most important code in British ceremonial history. The horse had found something that high-tech surveillance had missed, something that would turn their shame into the first line of defense against a plot that could have caused chaos at one of the world's most watched events. And what about Lark Rowan? She was about to find out that ruining a good man's name was the easy part. The hard part would be covering her tracks when that same man became the only thing standing between her master plan and total exposure. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to know what Valor was really trying to tell Arthur and why that QR code that was hidden in plain sight was about to blow the whole conspiracy wide open. Stay with me, because the next part of this story is about a rundown coffee shop in Shoreditch, a part-time barista with skills the government would pay millions for, and a discovery that would show that sometimes the most complicated intelligence work is done by people just trying to pay their rent. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. You know what they say about London: it's got more surveillance cameras per square mile than anywhere else on Earth, but sometimes the most important clues are hiding in plain sight. And if Arthur hadn't seen that micro QR code bouncing off a temporary grandstand at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, tomorrow's Trooping the Colour would have turned into a technology nightmare that could have changed the way modern ceremonial security works forever. But first, let me explain what Arthur was up against. His reputation was in shambles, his phone was taken away, and every major news outlet in the UK was running variations of the same story: drunk guard threatens royal ceremony. The hashtags were trending all over the world, and the comment sections looked like they had been copied and pasted from the same bot farm. But here's the thing about military training: it teaches you how to work under pressure, even when everything around you is falling apart. So there was Arthur, walking Valor through the ceremonial route for what he thought would be the last time. The mall looked like a red carpet leading to his professional death. He wouldn't be one of the guards protecting the thousands of people who would line these barriers to watch the Queen's birthday parade tomorrow. He knew it was ironic that he was planning a ceremony he wasn't allowed to go to. But Valor? Valor was on a whole different level. As they got closer to the temporary grandstands by St. James's Park, the horse's behavior changed. Do you remember the 2 paws 1 rhythm from the Camden event? It was back, but this time it was more important. Valor's ears turned toward the hospitality scaffolding like satellite dishes trying to find a signal. Then there was the stamping, stamp, stamp, pause, stamp, so slow and steady that it felt like Morse code. Arthur had been with his horse for 3 years and had learned to read him like a book, but this was a whole new chapter. Valor wasn't scared or worried. He was focused on something specific in the forest of temporary structures that would house VIP guests during tomorrow's ceremony. It was exactly 2:47 p.m. when the afternoon sun hit the grandstand at that perfect London angle, you know, the one, when the light slices between buildings and makes these razor-sharp shadows that photographers love. Arthur saw it then? A small flash of light, no bigger than a smartphone screen, bouncing off what looked like a normal crowd control barrier. But the reflection wasn't by chance. It was geometric and exact, making a pattern that Arthur's military-trained eyes saw right away as strange. Someone had put something in that barrier that was meant to be invisible unless you were looking at it from the right angle at the right time. Arthur's first thought was to look into it right away, but 3 years in the household cavalry had taught him how important it is to be patient and plan ahead. You shouldn't rush into situations you don't know about without backup, especially when your job is already on the line. So he did what any smart soldier would do, he wrote everything down. Arthur sent a bunch of photos from his personal phone, which the military hadn't taken because it wasn't theirs. Not obvious, touristy shots that would get attention, but casual pictures that just happened to show the reflection from different angles. These are the kinds of pictures a guardsman might send to his worried mother to show her that he was still doing his job, even though the media was going crazy. But this is where it gets interesting. That little pattern that you can see. It wasn't just light bouncing off of metal. It was a micro QR code hidden in what looked like regular crowd control gear, but was actually something much more advanced. Arthur needed help figuring it out, and he knew exactly where to find it, Shoreditch. It took 15 minutes on the tube to get from Horse Guards to the other side of the world. The ceremonial heart of London was all about tradition and rules, but Shoreditch was all about creativity and hard work. Arthur's destination was a coffee shop called Signal to Noise, the kind of place where freelance graphic designers competed for Wi-Fi bandwidth with cryptocurrency traders and art students nursing single espressos for 4 hours. Behind the counter, steaming milk with the precision of a chemistry experiment, was Maya Patel. 26 years old, with a computer science degree from Imperial College, but paying London rent by pulling espresso shots and troubleshooting tourists' phone problems. Arthur had met her 6 months ago when his laptop crashed, during a particularly stressful period with his mother's medical bills. Maya had recovered 3 weeks of lost work in about 10 minutes, refusing payment and suggesting he might want to encrypt his files better. "Arthur," she said without looking up from the machine. "Heard you were having a rough week. Are we going straight to the hard stuff or getting a double shot?" Maya could read people like code, figuring out their problems and giving them answers before they were done talking. Arthur needed that skill right now. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me with something. Analyzing images. Recognizing patterns. That's the kind of thing they probably taught you at Imperial, but don't put it on a barista job description." Maya's eyes lit up. This was her element, the intersection of technology and mystery that made her side projects more interesting than any corporate programming job could ever be. "Show me what you've got." Arthur pulled out his phone, swiping to the burst of photos from the grandstand. Maya squinted at the screen, then grabbed her laptop from behind the counter, a machine that probably had more processing power than the entire coffee shop's point-of-sale system. Okay, I can see there's something here, but the resolution's not great. Let me run this through some filters, boost the contrast, and maybe isolate the reflection pattern. Maya typed quickly on the keyboard, just like she did when she made perfect cappuccino foam. In just a few minutes, she had the picture loaded into photo editing software that Arthur was pretty sure cost more than his rent each month. Channel separation first, she said, more to herself than to Arthur. Strip out the background noise, boost the geometric patterns, and... oh wow! The screen showed a sharp, clear picture that made Arthur's military training kick into high gear. What had looked like random light reflection was actually a complex QR code, no bigger than a postage stamp but full of information. Maya took out her phone and scanned the enhanced code. Her face changed from curious to worried as the data filled her screen. Arthur, this isn't just a QR code. It looks like a coordinate system. Data about timing, location pins, frequency settings, and a timer that counts down to something. Where did you get this from? Arthur talked about the grandstand, Valor's strange behavior, and the exact time of the reflection. Maya's frown grew deeper as she read through the decoded information. These coordinates. They're not for Horse Guards or the mall. They are pointing to Brent Cross. In North London, close to the mall. It looks like these frequency settings are meant for some kind of audio broadcasting system. Arthur finished, but horses would hear it. Valor's been reacting to high-frequency sounds all week. I thought it was stress, but what if someone has been testing the equipment? Maya opened a map app and typed in the QR code's coordinates. The pin landed on what looked like a small industrial estate just outside the main shopping complex. This was the kind of area that had storage units, repair shops, and businesses that liked to keep a low profile. There's more, Maya said, pointing out another part of the decoded data. This checksum pattern. It looks like the signature of the beacon advertising systems that shopping malls use. You know, the ones that send you messages when you walk by certain stores. This setup, on the other hand, is much more advanced. It's set up for mass broadcast, not individual targeting. Arthur felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The mysterious van in Camden, Valor's protective behavior, the precise timing of the CCTV blackout, and now a hidden broadcasting system with coordinates pointing to a storage facility in North London. Someone was planning something for tomorrow's ceremony, something that involved high-frequency audio and mass communication. Maya, I need to check out those coordinates. Tonight, the night before the ceremony. But I can't do it by myself, and I can't ask anyone from my unit to help. My career is already hanging by a thread. Maya looked at him for a long time, thinking about what that meant. Then she closed her laptop with a snap. Well, I was just going to spend the evening binge-watching Netflix and pretending I don't have student loans. This sounds a lot more fun. Plus, if someone is going to mess with one of the biggest events on the British calendar, that usually has an effect on property values in my neighborhood. She grabbed her jacket and a messenger bag that Arthur thought had more advanced electronics than most people would know about. But first, we're going to make a stop. I want backup if we're going to check out a shady storage facility. The kind of backup that doesn't appear in any official records. As they headed for the tube station, Arthur felt something he hadn't experienced in days: hope. Not the desperate kind that clings to unlikely outcomes, but the steady confidence that comes from having the right tools and the right partner for a difficult job. Valor had detected something that high-tech surveillance systems had missed. Maya had decoded a message that was hidden in plain sight. And Arthur was about to discover that the most dangerous threats to modern ceremonial security weren't always the ones that came through official channels. But first, they needed to get to Brent Cross. And they needed to do it before whoever planted that QR code realized their hidden message had been discovered. Because tomorrow morning, thousands of people would gather on the Mall to watch the Queen's birthday parade, and Arthur was beginning to understand that someone was planning to turn that celebration into something else entirely. Stay with me, because what we found in that North London storage facility was going to change everything we thought we knew about modern information warfare. You want to know what real fear looks like? It's not the Hollywood version with screaming and dramatic music. Real fear is standing in front of a storage unit in North London at 9 p.m., watching your horse exhibit behaviors that your 3 years of military training never prepared you for, while realizing that tomorrow's ceremony might be walking straight into a technological trap that could redefine modern security forever. Arthur had managed to get official approval for an urban training exercise that would take him and Valor through Brent Cross, the kind of bureaucratic sleight of hand that looked completely legitimate on paper while giving him cover to investigate those coordinates Maya had decoded from the micro QR. Military protocol is strict, but it's also predictable. If you know how to work within the system, you can usually find a way to accomplish your mission without technically breaking any rules. But as they approached the industrial estate behind the shopping center, Valor's behavior shifted into something Arthur had never witnessed before. The horse's breathing became rapid and shallow, his neck muscles corded with tension, and that distinctive whistling sound that cavalry veterans call Condition 3, the respiratory pattern that signals a horse detecting immediate, specific danger. Maya had insisted on coming along, her messenger bag packed with equipment that probably violated several telecommunications regulations. She had said, if we're walking into some kind of high-tech setup, you need someone who understands how these systems actually work. Military training is great for tactics, but this is about signal processing and data warfare. The storage facility looked like a normal place to store Christmas decorations and furniture from apartments that couldn't afford to heat them. But Valor's ears were locked onto Unit 47B like radar dishes tracking an incoming missile. Arthur's phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number, urban exercise approved, but maintain radio silence per operational security protocols. Report status via secure channels only. The message looked official and felt official, but something about the timing made Arthur's instincts prickle. 3 years in the household cavalry teaches you to tell when communications are too easy. Meanwhile, Lark Rowan was making last-minute changes to equipment inside Unit 47B that would have impressed military contractors. She had put together what she called her perception farm, a network of small, battery-powered speakers that were set to play high-frequency sounds at exactly the right times. The frequencies were set up to annoy horses while being almost inaudible to people. Her plan was simple but effective. As the ceremonial procession reached its highest point on the Mall tomorrow morning, her hidden speakers would all turn on at the same time. The sudden, coordinated distress of several ceremonial horses would make exactly the kind of chaotic footage that her deepfake experts had already prepared to spread. Within minutes, social media would be full of accusations of animal cruelty and bad care of the Queen's horses. But that was just the beginning. While people were focused on the horse drama, her backup system would kick in. Lark had placed relay drones at key points along the ceremonial route. These were small, quiet planes that looked like commercial photography gear. These drones would record high-quality video of any security responses, mapping out protocols and blind spots that could be useful information for future operations. The best part of the plan was that it was easy to deny. Horses are naturally scared of crowds and loud noises. Animals in the military can act in strange ways when they are under a lot of stress. Even if someone thought that technology had something to do with it, it would take a lot of time and effort to prove it, long after the damage to public trust had been done. What Lark didn't expect was a horse trained to pick up on these kinds of signals. Arthur approached Unit 47B with all of his senses on high alert. Valor's health had gotten worse than anything that was written in the cavalry veterinary manuals. The horse wasn't just sensing danger, he was mapping it, cataloging it, and getting ready to do something that Arthur's human senses couldn't fully understand. Maya had her laptop out and was using signal analysis software that showed the area in waves of electromagnetic activity. "Arthur, this place is lit up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. There are a lot of transmission sources here, and they're all using frequencies that standard monitoring equipment would have a hard time picking up." Arthur could see the edge of what looked like a professional audio setup through the gap under the rolling door. Battery packs, signal processors, and groups of speakers that were not meant to be used as storage units. This was infrastructure, the kind of high-tech, expensive gear that showed they had a lot of money, and was serious about their investigation. But they weren't the only ones looking into it. Arthur's phone buzzed again, and this time it looked like an official message from RASB, the Royal Armoured Signal Protection Unit. The message was short but scary: counter-UAS teams are getting ready for ceremonial security enhancement. Keep an eye on drone activity during tomorrow's events. Arthur showed Maya the message, and she frowned as she read it. Counter-UAS. That's drone defense, right? Why would they be worried about drones during a ceremonial parade unless... Arthur finished. The pieces were coming together in ways that made his military training scream warnings. The audio gear in the storage unit, the drone countermeasures, and the perfectly timed communications all point to organized crime. This was planned, professional, and aimed directly at the ceremony tomorrow. Valor stamped once, then twice, and then settled into that familiar 2-pause-1 rhythm that was becoming their own private code for talking to each other. Arthur had only heard the low, rumbling sound once before, during a training exercise when Valor had found an intruder hiding in tall grass 50 yards away. This time, though, the horse made a new sound. Maya's equipment picked up on the change right away. Valor's frequency just spiked. Someone inside that unit just turned something on, probably because we were getting closer. Arthur made a command decision that went against everything he had learned in training. Instead of keeping an eye on things from a distance and reporting through official channels, he walked right up to the storage unit door and knocked. The response was quick. The electromagnetic signature that Maya's equipment had been tracking stopped completely, and there was only the kind of digital silence that happens when electronics are turned off quickly. After 30 seconds, a voice came from inside. It was professional and controlled, but there was a hint of surprise in it that made it sound like the person inside hadn't expected visitors. Units rented through the end of the month. Private property. Please move along. Arthur recognized the tone right away. It was the careful neutrality of someone trained to deflect authority without seeming confrontational. This person wasn't just an amateur who didn't like ceremonial traditions. This was a professional, maybe with the same kind of training Arthur had. "Actually," Arthur called back, "I'm looking into reports of unauthorized broadcasting equipment in this area. Cavalry communications protocol requires inspection of potential signal interference sources within ceremonial operational zones." It was all bureaucratic nonsense, but it sounded official because it was delivered with enough confidence and technical language. Maya gave him an impressed look, as if to say that military training was good for more than just parade formations. The silence inside the unit lasted long enough for Arthur to count Valor's breathing, which was getting more and more agitated. Then Arthur heard the sound of equipment being quickly unplugged and footsteps going toward what he thought was a back exit. But Valor had other ideas. The horse suddenly lunged forward, not in a threatening way, but with the kind of movement that cavalry training teaches you to never question. The rolling door hit his shoulder at just the right angle to set off the emergency release mechanism, which is a safety feature that keeps people from getting stuck inside broken units. The door rolled up to show exactly what Maya's scans had suggested, an advanced audio broadcasting setup that looked like it belonged in a professional recording studio, not a storage facility in the suburbs. There were battery packs, signal processors, amplification equipment, and a lot of directional speakers that were clearly made for precise, targeted transmission. But there were no people in the unit. The person who had been inside had disappeared through what Arthur now saw was a carefully hidden back exit. It had probably been cut through the back wall and made to look like part of the unit's normal construction. Maya was already taking pictures of everything, capturing angles and details that would help put together the whole system's capabilities. Arthur, this isn't just broadcasting equipment. This is military-grade psychological operations hardware. The kind of stuff that governments spend millions developing for crowd control and information warfare. Arthur felt his phone buzz with another message, but this time the sender identification made his blood run cold. The message was from his boss, Finch, report location immediately. Unauthorized investigation activities detected via GPS monitoring. Return to base for disciplinary review. They had been tracked. His urban training exercise was a cover that worked until someone figured out where those GPS coordinates were really taking him. He only had a few minutes, maybe less, before official channels started asking questions he couldn't answer without ruining the whole investigation. But as Arthur looked at the broken broadcast equipment, he realized something that changed everything. The battery packs were still hot. The signal processors showed logs of recent activity. And most importantly, the system's countdown timer was still going. Whatever Lark Rowan had planned for the ceremony tomorrow, she had just lost her main deployment site. Arthur was looking at just one node in a much larger network, though. Maya grabbed his arm, and her laptop screen showed a stream of news signals lighting up across North London. Arthur, we need to leave right now. The whole system just went live, backup sites, relay points, and redundant transmitters. Whoever was in charge of this operation just put their backup plan into action. As they led Valor away from the storage facility, Arthur's mind raced through tactical assessments. Tomorrow morning, thousands of people would line up on the mall for one of the most important events in Britain. The tools they had just found were meant to ruin the party. Lark Rowan was probably making backup plans that made this storage unit seem like a small problem. But Arthur had advantages that Lark hadn't thought of. He had a horse that could tell him exactly what frequencies her equipment worked on. He could decode any signals they came across because Maya was an expert in technology. And most importantly, he had just enough official power to act on what they had found out, as long as he could figure out how to do it without ruining his career. The drive back to central London felt like racing against a countdown timer that only Valor could hear. Arthur was starting to realize that everything they had found so far was just preparation for something much more dangerous. Tomorrow's ceremony was less than 12 hours away. Stay with me, because what happened next turned this from an investigation into active combat, with the most watched ceremony in the British calendar hanging in the balance. Do you want to know what real pressure looks like? While a plot to destroy British ceremonial tradition is going on around you in real time, try to keep perfect military formation. The next 95 minutes of Trooping the Colour would put everything Arthur and Valor had learned about each other to the test and show that sometimes the best intelligence work is done by a horse who won't let his rider fail. The morning of June 15th was like a postcard come to life in London. The sky was clear, the light was perfect for photographers, and the temperature was just right for the huge crowds that were already gathering along the mall. By 8 a.m., people were lining up behind the barriers, ready to watch one of the most important military ceremonies in the world. Arthur stood in the courtyard of the Hyde Park Barracks, adjusting Valor's ceremonial tack with hands that were steadier than they should have been. 3 days ago, his job, was over. He was now in full dress uniform, getting ready for the ceremony he had been training for all year. Colonel Pemberton's reinstatement came with just 4 words, "Don't make me regret this." But Arthur knew this wasn't really about redemption. This was to stop a tech attack that could have turned Britain's most watched event into chaos. Lark Rowan's backup systems were still working somewhere out there, still counting down to whatever trouble she had planned for the moment when millions of people would be watching. The ceremonial schedule was as precise as a military operation. 10:30 a.m., the escort for the King or Queen lines up. The procession starts at Buckingham Palace at 10:45 a.m. 11 a.m., get to Horse Guards Parade for the main event. 12:25 p.m., the procession goes back to the palace. 1 p.m., the RAF flies over the balcony. Every minute was planned out, and every move was practiced until it became second nature. Maya's voice crackled through the hidden earpiece that Arthur definitely shouldn't have been wearing. She was sitting in a coffee shop near Westminster Bridge, where she could see the electronic signatures they had mapped from the Brent Cross storage facility. "Arthur, I'm seeing multiple activation signals across the network. Whatever backup plan she put in place, it's going live right on time." Valor's ears turned toward frequencies that Arthur's human ears couldn't hear. The 2-pause-1 rhythm came back, but it was more urgent and insistent this time. The horse was following something specific in the electromagnetic soup of modern London, picking up signals that would have been too much for the most advanced military monitoring equipment. At 10:42 a.m., 3 minutes before the official start of the procession, Valor's behavior changed into what Arthur had learned to recognize as combat mode. The horse's breathing got deeper, and the muscles in his neck tensed up. The low rumble meant he had sensed immediate danger. Maya's voice came through Arthur's earpiece, multiple drone signatures launching from positions around Hyde Park. Small, low altitude, and designed to look like commercial photography equipment. But Arthur, their flight patterns are too coordinated for civilian operators. The first test came when the Sovereign's escort formed a line. Arthur was in the 3rd rank, which is where military rules said he should be. But Valor's ears were tuned into something above that the people below couldn't see. Arthur saw something move out of the corner of his eye. It was a small plane, no bigger than a dinner plate, flying just above the treetops at the edge of the park. This was one of Lark's relay drones, which were made to take high-resolution video of security responses and find places that were hard to see for future missions. But the person flying the drone didn't know that Valor was trained to track aerial threats. Valor's response was so subtle that most people would have missed it. A half step to the side that put his body in the way of the drone's camera so that Arthur couldn't see him. A small change in the way the person walked that messed up the plane's tracking system. Then, at just the right time, a perfectly timed head toss caught the morning sun and sent it straight into the drone's optical sensors. The effect was immediate. The drone's stabilization system couldn't handle the sudden glare, so it quickly climbed up, right into the flight path of a counter-UAS net launcher that RA-SB had put on the roof of Apsley House. The plane disappeared into a tangle of high-strength polymer mesh, and its transmission cut out in the middle. Maya said, "Drone 1 down." "But Arthur, there are at least 3 more, and the acoustic array is still active." The procession reached the mall at exactly 10:47 a.m., and that's when Arthur got his first clear view of Lark Rowan's true genius. There were relay points for her high-frequency audio system hidden among the real hospitality structures. The speakers were small enough to blend in with the temporary scaffolding but powerful enough to send out coordinated sonic bursts that would drive ceremonial horses crazy. The best part of her plan was that it could be denied. Horses get scared when they see a lot of people or hear strange sounds. Even the best trained ceremonial animals can act strangely when they are under a lot of stress. By the time anyone looked into the possibility of technological interference, the video would have already gone viral and public trust would have already been damaged. But Valor wasn't just any ceremonial horse. After 3 years of working with Arthur, he could tell the difference between real threats and fake ones. As the procession got closer to the area with the most people, Valor's gait changed into what Arthur recognized as active countermeasures. The horse started to move in small ways that looked completely natural to onlookers but actually messed up the acoustic targeting algorithms that Lark's system relied on. Every time a high-frequency burst went off, Valor was a little out of place, either because the other horses were in the way or because the temporary structures were blocking his view. Maya's analysis confirmed what Arthur was feeling through Valor's movements. The acoustic system can't get a clean lock. Your horse is making some kind of interference pattern that's messing up their targeting computers. At 11:15 am, when the ceremony was at its most visible on Horse Guards Parade, Lark made her biggest mistake. She was angry that her precise acoustic targeting didn't work, so she turned on a broader frequency sweep. This basically carpet-bombed the whole ceremonial area with high-frequency noise that was meant to make all the horses jump at the same time. But instead of the coordinated chaos she had planned, the broad-spectrum approach set off something she hadn't expected. Every horse in the ceremony began to act like Valor, making small changes to their positions, timing, and formations that looked like perfectly executed military precision to the crowds. What the millions of viewers saw was the household cavalry performing with great coordination and discipline. Arthur knew that Lark's own weapon had turned the whole ceremony into one big intelligence-gathering operation. The payoff came at 11:43 am. Using the sound mapping that the horse's movements made, RA-SB technicians were able to find the exact location of Lark's main control node. Her equipment was hidden in a hospitality tent for parliamentary guests and disguised as real audio-visual support hardware. The takedown was done with such military precision that even Arthur would have been proud of it. 2 technicians in catering uniforms walked up to the tent at the exact moment when all cameras were focused on the ceremonial salute. The whole network at Lark went down 90 seconds later. Maya's voice showed how relieved she was. "That's it, Arthur. The system is shut down. Whatever she had planned for the flypast, it's not going to happen now." But the real win wasn't technological. Arthur could feel something that had been missing for 3 days, the rhythm of perfect partnership with Valor, as the procession came back down the mall at 12:40 p.m. The horse not only followed his orders, but they also worked together as one intelligence-gathering unit. The people lining the barriers saw exactly what they had come to see, centuries of tradition carried out perfectly. Millions of people who watched on TV saw one of the best ceremonial performances in a long time. Even the news coverage focused on how well the riders and horses worked together. What none of them knew was that they had just seen a masterclass in how biological intelligence can beat technological warfare. Instincts that had been honed over thousands of years of working with horses had outsmarted Lark Rowan's complex systems. At 1:15 p.m., as the RAF Typhoons flew overhead in perfect formation, Arthur felt Valor settle into a relaxed breathing pattern that meant the danger had passed. The 2-pause-1 rhythm that had become their secret code changed into a steady, happy beat that felt like a job well done. Maya's last message came as the ceremony ended. "Arthur, you should know, we recorded everything. The acoustic signatures, the drone intercepts, the network architecture. Whatever legal proceedings come next, we've got enough evidence to put Lark Rowan and her entire operation away for a very long time." But as Arthur led Valor back to the stables, he realized that the evidence was almost secondary. What mattered was that they had protected more than just a ceremony. They had kept the idea that tradition and technology could work together, and that the oldest ways of working together could still beat the newest ways of fighting. The crowds were already leaving, phones full of pictures and videos that would flood social media for days. But none of those recordings would show what Arthur knew, that sometimes the best defense systems have four legs and won't let their partners fail. Tomorrow, there would be debriefings, paperwork, and probably awards that would look good on his service record. There would be media coverage, public relations statements, and the usual ceremonial aftermath tonight. But right now, Arthur was walking through the heart of London with the horse that had just helped him save one of Britain's most important traditions. He felt something that no amount of technology could replicate, the simple satisfaction of a job well done. Stay with me, because now we get to the really interesting part: what happened when Lark Rowan found out that a guardsman and his horse had ruined her entire operation, and how justice finally caught up with the most sophisticated disinformation campaign in British ceremonial history. Do you want to know what justice looks like in the digital age? It's not like the movies, with dramatic speeches in court and last-minute confessions. Real justice is metadata timestamps that don't lie, surveillance footage that tells the whole story, and a data trail so long that even the most advanced disinformation campaign can't stand up to basic forensic analysis. And what happened to Lark Rowan in the 48 hours after Trooping the Colour showed that sometimes the best lies have the seeds of their own destruction. The unraveling started with something Lark never saw coming: her own perfectionism. When you run a high-end disinformation operation, timing is everything. Every post on social media, every comment from a bot, and every fake outrage moment has to happen at the right time in people's minds to have the most effect. But what about that accuracy? That's also what makes the fingerprints stand out the most. RASP's digital forensics team, led by a quietly brilliant analyst named Sarah Chen, had been looking at metadata patterns on social media for months. They had made algorithms that could find fake content by looking at the tiny timing differences between real human interactions and coordinated bot activity. In real life, people don't post the same thing in the same second. People don't share content with perfect timing across time zones. But Lark's operation did. The Camden footage had been spread across platforms with timestamps that screamed automation. The bot comments that supported the drunk guard story all had the same grammatical patterns and posting times, which no human could have done. The metadata analysis showed that several key pieces of evidence had been uploaded 3 days before the actual Camden incident. This was the most damning thing of all. Lark had been so focused on the advanced deepfake technology that she had missed basic operational security. Her team had planned the smear campaign ahead of time, making fake videos and writing responses for social media ahead of time. When the real Camden encounter happened, they just turned on content that was already there without changing the digital timestamps. Arthur learned about this breakthrough during a debriefing session that felt more like vindication than interrogation. Colonel Pemberton's office had turned into an incident command center, with laptop screens showing network diagrams, communication logs, and surveillance footage that painted a picture of a conspiracy that was much bigger than anyone had thought. "Finch," the colonel started, but his tone was very different from how it had been at their last meeting. "It seems that your instincts were much more correct than what we first thought. Once you knew where to look, the evidence was overwhelming. In the weeks leading up to Trooping the Colour, automatic number plate recognition cameras caught the mysterious white van from Camden at 14 different places in London. The car was registered to a shell company that only existed on paper and had an address that turned out to be an empty office building in Canary Wharf. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, the independent CCTV system, at a vintage record store across the street from where Arthur and Valor saw the van. Marcus Webb, the owner of the store and a former sound engineer, put in his own high-definition security system after a string of break-ins earlier this year. During those 9 important minutes, his cameras caught everything that the official surveillance network missed. The footage was eye-opening. It didn't show Arthur stumbling drunk while Valor reared in distress. Instead, it showed something else entirely. A young teen, who was clearly high on something and lost, had been weaving in and out of traffic near the intersection. Valor had seen the kid moving around in a strange way and put himself in the way to keep Arthur from walking straight into a potentially dangerous situation. The horse hadn't been scared, he had been protecting Arthur. Arthur wasn't drunk, he was just paying attention to what his horse was saying. The whole scandal was based on video that had been so skillfully edited that it fooled millions of people around the world. But Marcus Webb's cameras showed something else that changed the whole investigation. The people in the white van were busy during the 9 minutes when official surveillance was off. Two people in dark clothes got out of the car with equipment cases and what looked like devices that blocked signals. They had systematically turned off CCTV cameras in a 3-block radius, making a perfect dead zone for surveillance. What they didn't expect was to be recorded by a system they didn't know existed. Maya had played a big role in analyzing this footage. Her image enhancement software showed faces, license plates, and equipment details that were directly linked to the Brent Cross storage facility. More importantly, her technical analysis showed that the signal jamming equipment had the same frequency signatures as the ones they had found during the failed ceremony disruption. The arrest happened at 6:47 a.m. on a Friday morning, and it was coordinated across several locations at the same time. Lark Rowan was arrested at her London Bridge office while forensic teams served warrants at the Brent Cross facility, the Shell company address in Canary Wharf, and 3 homes linked to her business. The evidence they found was shocking. Contract papers that show payments from foreign groups that want to mess up British ceremonial traditions. Technical details for sound equipment made just for making horses angry at public events. Detailed psychological profiles of military personnel who could be targeted for character assassination. The most damning evidence was the communications logs, showing Lark's coordination with overseas clients who had paid high prices for what they called democratic transparency initiatives, but were actually complex attacks on British cultural institutions. Arthur watched the news coverage from his mother's care facility, where he had finally been able to visit without worrying about reporters camping outside. The headlines had changed a lot: Hero Guard exposes, cyber attack on royal ceremony. Disinformation plot targeting British traditions uncovered, and horses intelligence helps solve modern conspiracy. But the best part was when the independent Camden footage was made public. Social media sites that had spread the false story had to make corrections and take down the content. #Justice for Arthur and #Valor the Hero took the place of the hashtags that had been popular around the world, such as #DrunkGuard, #Royal Scandal, and #Defund Ceremony. The bot networks that had spread the false information were found and shut down one by one. The same server farms that Lark's group had been paying to make public opinion were linked to account after account that had posted the same angry comments. Even more importantly, the investigation showed that Arthur and Valor's case was just one of many targets in a much bigger campaign. Lark's group had been systematically attacking respected institutions in many countries using the same mix of deepfake technology, bot amplification, and character assassination that they had tried to use against the household cavalry. Her client list included a lot of groups that wanted to destabilize democratic institutions. Foreign governments trying to make people less confident in Western ceremonial traditions. Corporate clients who want to make regulatory agencies look bad. Political groups that want to ruin their opponents' reputations. The technical analysis of her equipment showed features that even military intelligence experts found impressive. The audio systems found at Brent Cross could have caused problems at any big public event, not just parades. Most automated detection systems couldn't tell that the deepfake technology was real. The bot networks could change people's minds on a large enough scale to affect elections. But Lark had made one big mistake. She thought her targets would act in predictable ways: a military group would put public relations ahead of investigation, a young guardsman would rather be ashamed than fight for the truth, and a horse was just an animal that didn't have the brains to see technological threats. She was wrong on all counts. Arthur's vindication came with recognition that went far beyond personal redemption. The investigation had revealed a type of threat that security services around the world were having trouble understanding, using social media as a weapon to attack cultural institutions. His case became a model for finding and stopping similar operations. Military animal behavior experts looked at Valor's role in the detection and found that horses' natural sensitivity to high-frequency sounds made them especially good at finding certain types of electronic surveillance and disruption equipment. The household cavalry started making new rules that used horse intelligence in their security measures. But maybe the most important thing the case showed was that traditional partnerships, between people and animals, between instinct and technology, and between personal integrity and institutional support, could still beat the most advanced modern threats. Once the evidence was gathered, the legal proceedings moved quickly. Lark Rowan admitted to charges of planning to disrupt public events, hacking into government infrastructure, and running an unlicensed surveillance network. The organization she worked for was shut down, its assets were frozen, and its client list became the basis for ongoing international investigations. Arthur returned to active duty with a commendation that would follow him throughout his military career. But he had something that no amount of fake scandal could ever take away, the knowledge that he and Valor had protected something bigger than themselves when it mattered most. The ceremony went on as it had for hundreds of years, but there were new layers of security that were based on what they had learned from Lark's failed attack. Modern detection systems made traditional protocols better. Technological analysis backed up human judgment. The horses in the stables of the household cavalry were not only beautiful animals, but also smart partners in protecting the nation's heritage. Stay with me, because the last chapter of this story isn't about justice or revenge, it's about the quiet moment when a guardsman and his horse finally found peace after the storm. It's also about what that partnership means for the future of ceremonial security in an age when the biggest threats often come disguised as entertainment. You know what peace sounds like. It's not the lack of noise, London never sleeps, and the soft sounds of horses settling down for the night can always be heard in the household cavalry stables. When everything finally makes sense and the puzzle pieces fit together so well that you can almost hear the click, that's real peace. 3 days after trooping the colour, Arthur stood in Valor's stall and listened to his partner's steady breathing in the golden light coming through the stable windows. He finally understood what they had done together. The media circus had already moved on to the next scandal, the next controversy, and the next fake outrage designed to get attention and make money off of anger. Arthur had politely turned down 17 interview requests, 4 documentary opportunities, and 1 very pushy tabloid journalist who had tried to follow him to his mother's nursing home. Military rules were clear about how to deal with the media, but Arthur had learned more than that. Colonel Pemberton's praise was typical of the military, exemplary judgment under ceremonial constraint, with particular commendation for innovative intelligence gathering and threat assessment protocols. The official language couldn't describe what had really happened, that a young guardsman and his horse had stopped a sophisticated attack on one of Britain's most cherished traditions, but it didn't need to. The people who mattered understood. The quiet times were what really made them happy. It's like watching the evening news report on how security measures are getting stricter for ceremonial events, knowing that the rules they came up with will keep future ceremonies safe. Or reading the internal RA-SB bulletin about adding equine behavioral analysis to threat detection systems, knowing that Valor's intelligence was now officially recognized as a valuable security asset. But tonight was different. Arthur had brought Valor's favorite treats, expensive organic carrots that technically broke military procurement rules, but every cavalry officer pretended not to notice. Tonight was about closure. The horse accepted them with the dignified gratitude of a partner who knew that some gestures are more important than rules. You know what I figured out? Arthur said as he stroked Valor's neck, and the horse crunched happily. You weren't just picking up those frequencies. You were learning them, mapping them, and building some kind of pattern recognition system that let you guess where the next threat would come from. Valor's ear turned toward Arthur's voice, a sign that he was listening, processing, and storing the information for later. Arthur had been partners with these people for more than 3 years, and he could read their micro-expressions better than he could read most people's faces. The investigation had revealed things that still amazed Arthur. Lark Rowan's operation had been going after ceremonial events in several countries, using different versions of the same plan that she had tried to use against Trooping the Color. Her clients were foreign governments that wanted to weaken trust in Western democratic traditions, businesses that wanted to discredit regulatory oversight, and political movements that wanted to destroy the credibility of institutions. But Arthur and Valor were the first to successfully fight back against her tactics. Their case had become a model for finding and stopping similar operations all over the world. Military intelligence was looking into Valor's behavior and coming up with new ways to include animal intelligence in modern security systems. Maya had sent Arthur a technical report that he had to read 3 times to fully understand. Valor's sensitivity to high-frequency sounds wasn't just in his genes, it was something he learned and got better at over time. The horse had been unknowingly keeping track of the sounds made by electronic devices, creating a database of threatening and harmless sounds that was better than even the most advanced computer algorithms. More importantly, Valor had shown something that no AI system could do, the ability to predict how people would act based on environmental cues that electronic sensors might miss. The horse had noticed Lark's patterns of watching, knew that the Camden incident was planned, and knew when the ceremony would be interrupted. Arthur's phone buzzed with a message that made him smile. His mother's care facility reported that she'd been bragging to other residents about her son's role in protecting the Queen's ceremony. The nursing staff had to limit her daily newspaper reading because she kept cutting out articles about the investigation to send to relatives. The financial pressure that had been crushing Arthur for months had finally eased. His temporary suspension had been changed to special assignment status, with back pay and a small bonus for exceptional service under unusual circumstances. More importantly, a number of private security companies had contacted him about consulting work. This was the kind of legitimate side income that wouldn't get in the way of his military duties. But the real change was harder to measure. Arthur felt different, more sure of himself and more aware of what he could and couldn't do. He learned from the experience that sometimes the most important battles are not fought with weapons or technology, but with observation, patience, and the wisdom to trust partnerships that go beyond species. Valor shifted his weight, a small movement that meant he was getting ready for bed. But his ears stayed alert, still keeping an eye on the sound environment that had become his specialty. Arthur knew that his partner would probably never fully let his guard down. The experience had changed Valor too, sharpening instincts that were already very good. The stable quieted down as the last of the duty staff finished their evening rounds. Outside the walls, London kept its eternal rhythm going, sirens, traffic, and the distant thrum of the city that never really sleeps. But inside the stables, all Arthur could hear was the soft sound of horses breathing, leather creaking, and the sound of a hoof hitting straw every now and then. He leaned against the stall door and watched Valor's shadow in the dim light. There would be new tasks, problems, and chances to help others tomorrow. The household cavalry would keep doing both ceremonial and operational duties. The investigation into Lark Rowan's network would grow to include working with other countries to stop false information campaigns. Arthur knew that technology would change, threats would change, and security protocols would need to be updated all the time. But tonight, in the quiet of the stables, he finally let himself feel proud of what they had done. Not only did they successfully defend a ceremony, but they also showed that traditional values like loyalty, observation, and partnership could still beat the most advanced modern threats. Valor's breathing slowed down to the rhythm of true rest, and Arthur knew it was time to let his partner sleep. But before leaving, He pressed his palm against the horse's warm flank, feeling the steady heartbeat that had carried them both through the most challenging week of their partnership. "Thank you," he whispered, knowing that Valor would understand the gratitude even if the words were too simple for the depth of what they'd shared. Arthur locked the stall and walked toward the barracks, his footsteps echoing softly in the corridor. London's ancient dance of tradition and change, ceremony and innovation, the past and future living side by side in the city's eternal present, which had survived everything history could throw at it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, a young guardsman and his horse had earned the right to rest, knowing that they'd protected something precious and irreplaceable, the idea that some traditions are worth defending, that some partnerships transcend understanding, and that sometimes the most sophisticated threats can be defeated by the simplest virtues. The stable lights dimmed automatically as Arthur walked away, leaving Valor to his dreams in the darkness that was never quite complete in a city that never quite slept. And in that peaceful time between duty and rest, between yesterday's victory and tomorrow's duties, peace finally settled over the old walls that had protected British ceremonial tradition for centuries. In the end, what mattered most was not the headlines, the praise, or the official recognition, but the quiet knowledge that they had done their job, when it mattered. They had protected something bigger than themselves, kept a tradition alive that linked the past and the future, and shown that even the oldest partnerships could handle the newest problems. The investigation would go on, the legal proceedings would go on, and the world would move on to its next crisis. Arthur Finch and Valor had earned their place in a story that would be told for generations in the stables of the household cavalry, where tradition lived in the daily care of magnificent animals trained to carry the weight of history. That was enough. More than enough. It was all of it.